Welcome to the Goat's Gravy, the ultimate podcast tailored for young professionals navigating the dynamic world of sales and sales leadership. We are here to serve up a blend of mentorship and advice. In each episode, we dive deep into conversations with accomplished leaders and rising stars in the sales industry. Together, we explore their triumphs, challenges, and invaluable experiences. Our goal? To distill their insights into practical lessons that can seamlessly integrate into your own career journey. So whether you're a seasoned sales expert or just starting out, join us as we ladle out wisdom and inspiration, empowering you to excel in the ever-evolving landscape of sales. Onward we go. All right, happy to be back with Demetri and Scott and our special in-studio guest. Really exciting. Ladies and gentlemen, prepare for an insightful journey into the world of sales and sales leadership, and we may add resilience.
Yes.
Because today we have a true industry luminary. What's luminary, Scott? You wrote this.
It's Patti.
It's Patti.
It's Patti.
That is luminary. Please join us in welcoming the exceptional Patti Winkel to the Goat's Gravy podcast. Welcome.
Hi, Patti.
Hi.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Let's give some background. With a remarkable career spanning over 27 years in sales, Patti is not only a seasoned professional, but a trailblazer in the field of tech sales. For the past 14 years, she has donned the hat of sales leader, orchestrated success and driving results with precision, currently serving as the Director of Customer Workflows at ServiceNow. Patti's expertise has been honed through pivotal roles at industry-leading companies, Oracle, where she excelled as an application sales manager, and Paychex, where she thrived as a district sales manager. Patti's not just a leader, she's an expert in developing teams through turnarounds, shaping them into finely tuned entities that deliver exceptional results. Her belief in the power of resiliency, if I can say it, as a key sales trait is a testament to enduring success. Patti understands that great teams are crafted on the pillars of people, accountability, a clear vision, and a philosophy that is undoubtedly contributed to her stellar track record. Outside of the corporate gig, Patti wears another hat, one that she proudly dons as a mother of three. Her passions extend beyond the professional realm as she enjoys traveling, cooking, and reading. We're all ready to be inspired by hearing Patti's story and learning from her experiences and knowledge. Welcome, Patti. Woo!
Thank you.
Excited to have you here.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So
great.
We're going to jump right in because before we kicked off, we're talking a little bit about your background. And I was fascinated to learn that you started selling at 16 years old. So do you mind just taking us through that journey of early selling?
I did. Sure. So one thing that is a little unique about me, and it's very interesting when I'm interviewing people today, is the fact that I didn't go to college. So I tried, but I always say I've been working full time since I was 16. I started selling at a bank, which is also sounds very strange.
Yeah.
So it's like when you would come deposit maybe a $5,000 check, you'd have me over the teller line trying to talk to you about trying to put some of it in a savings account. At 16 years old, I'm trying to, help people.
Yeah.
I was in banking. So I was at a bank for 7 years, worked my way up. So actually my leadership started at the bank.
Okay.
I did, right away. I'm always trying to learn more. I'm like naturally a curious person. And I think that's how I've kind of wound up in different roles, I'll say. Throughout my career of 27 years is a little scary when I feel like I just graduated high school. So I, went through being a supervisor at a bank to an assistant manager to a branch manager at the age of 18 years old, which is kind of scary.
That's incredible.
If it's like somebody actually robbed the bank, that there was an 18-year-old in charge. And
right.
Then went to sell mutual funds at the bank, a lot of different investments. Again, at the age of like 19, I'm sitting here telling someone where they should diversify their assets.
Yeah.
It's an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
And then I was going to be an at-home mom. So then I got married and I had a child. I'm like, I'm going to be an at-home mom. This is going to be great. After 9 months, I'm like, I'm horrible at this. I'm not good. I'm like, I need more. The recognition piece was something. It's like, you want your husband to come home and like recognize the fact that like you made dinner or something like that when it's like, so, that's how I ended up actually going into real estate. And okay. I think real estate taught me the importance of prospecting and like I used to be a buyer's agent because I felt like, and I don't say this in a bad way, but like you can kind of control buyers. There's a lot with like listings you can't control. And so buyers, I know that I can set up a fair amount of houses. I can talk them through the houses, get them start picturing where their furniture is going to be, how they're going to live there. I was always trying to position myself even for the one call close, you know?
So Patti, can I ask you a quick question? Because you mentioned a word there, curious and curiosity.
Yeah.
And I really key in on that when I'm interviewing, just to kind of test that. Because I think that's a trait that's a must have for any great salesperson. So as you got your first sales gig at the bank.
Yep.
And when did you know, first of all, what was that exact first sales gig? And then second question is, were you hesitant at all through that first journey of being a salesperson that this was for you, or did you just fall in love with it and run to the next and the next and the next?
Yeah. So the first part of that question was, what was my first gig?
Yeah.
It was exactly what I described.
But how'd you break into banking? How'd that even start?
I needed a job. It was my summer between my junior and senior year. My brother-in-law was working at the bank, and he's like, hey, they need a sales associate at the branch down the street. Do you want to go in and talk to them? And I went, talked to them, and ended up getting the job. And then it was awesome. Hey, this is part of the job. You know, you're going to sell checking and savings accounts. Yeah. And it's interesting because I used to always try to get people to open up like multiple checking accounts at once. Like you need one for your mortgage and your spending and all that. And there were times where people were questioning like the ethics of it. Like, do people really need that many?
Right.
But ironically, now if you go to a local bank here, like I set up accounts for my son and my daughter when they went into college, and it's like they got 2 checkings and a savings account. And I was like, I was just pioneering it like 20 years ago. Right. So yeah, I was literally slinging checking accounts.
And was there initially coming in, was there a mentor or someone that kind of helped you figure that out? Did they have really good training? And I mean, 16 years old, that's a lot to all of a sudden be in front of adults trying to sell.
There was no training.
Yeah.
No, there was not. There was the recognition piece of, whoever had the most accounts, there was recognition pieces, but there was the money. So I was definitely attracted to the money.
Motivator.
Exactly. Yeah. Because you got paid like per checking account that you referred. So when I started figuring out the comp plan, I was like, all right, this is fantastic.
Which is really impressive at 16 years old.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was going from, I started my first job and made $4 an hour at like a Hallmark, and to start, I mean, I made, when I was 18 and I got promoted branch manager, they gave me a base salary of $30,000 and I thought I was like ruling the roost. I was I'm amazing. So the money was attractive.
Love it.
There's a second part to your question.
Yeah. Yeah. It was just along, I think you're starting to, call out the traits of salespeople. And I just, that curiosity resonates with me.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, no pun intended, but how do you look at that when you're kind of hiring people? Is that one of the traits that you tend to hone in on?
I don't, but I should.
Yeah.
I actually don't. I think I've always noticed that about like myself, and do like having conversations with people when they just clearly want to learn more and they're kind of like picking through it. But that would be a great thing to add to that.
Yeah, Billy, you and I were talking about this in the last podcast, but it was, when Tony Blood was on. And when I'm in an interview hiring for salespeople, I love when people come at me aggressively with great questions. And I don't want to I want to do a lot of the listening to see, because sales is a function of a great question. If I try to dumb it down, but I just love, when someone is just ready to go with questions that are going to really, yes or no on the gig. I mean, and that's hard to do. Yeah. Because the flip side of that, and I just experienced this last week, is someone that's just going to puke all over me and just not stop talking about whatever. And I'm like twiddling my thumbs. I'm like, when is this person going to ask a good question? Yeah. So those are the flip sides.
Well, I think part of that too is that your early journey, and we can come back to that piece. Sure. I think there's a lot we can unpack around preparation and genuine curiosity, but self-development really, right? And then you also got promoted multiple times through that journey. And then at some point transitioned into selling real estate. So I'd love to learn, what are some of the early lessons from the bank world? And then you go to you're calling on people, right?
Mhm.
Coming in, there's more of an emotional attachment to what you're trying to sell, especially in real estate. And then you fast forward to the corporate career. How are those early experiences, or how did those kind of impact or set you up for success later on?
Yeah, I think that even when I'm interviewing, I'm looking for someone that has some sort of transactional background and has no fear. So, I worked at an in-store bank location, so I used to go into the aisles and bother people while they were grocery shopping and ask them to open a checking account, right?
Wow.
So the resiliency, we talk about that a lot, because I feel like people ask me all the time in an interview, what's the number one trait of a salesperson? I'm like, it's resiliency. Mm-hmm. Like, you're going to get no internally, externally, you're going to get no's all over the place. And so how do you respond to that? How do you not overreact to those things? And so I do think early on, being 16 and standing in a grocery store and walking up to someone who wants to buy a cantaloupe and asking them where they bank, there was a lot you can learn through that. That's just going to be passed on.
And then would you say, so then how about when you got into the real estate world?
Yeah.
What were some, obviously you learned courage to that first role. What were some of the adversities of selling real estate that you experienced?
Well, this is where I always like being a buyer's agent, to try to lessen the amount of adversity. How much more could I control? Mm-hmm. But one thing that I used to do is, and this is where I think it helped me prepare a lot for being in a role in outside sales, is I would do open houses even for other like real estate agents, because I just wanted the buyer that was coming in. They're walking in, they can't afford this house. Well, what house can you actually afford, right? And so that I'm trying to back into your question, but that is really, I think, it helped me learn how to ask for the business, because I was constantly asking for them to be able to let me be their buyer's agent for the house they did buy, in case this wasn't the one.
Right.
I'm not sure if that answers. Yeah, no,
that helps. And I think the transition from selling real estate then into the corporate world, mm-hmm. how different was that? And how did you adapt to the new selling environment?
Yeah. There actually was good training. So I guess kind of going back, was
that Oracle? Was that the first?
I was at Paychex. So I was
Paychex
at Paychex
first, okay.
for 11 years. So 2007 is when the market crashed. It's also when I went to Paychex, mm-hmm. because the money was not coming in anymore. And so they have a fantastic career, especially for people early in development. When we were preparing, you're talking about people with that ADP background. Yep. I mean, it's the same thing, right? Yep. And so I really enjoyed kind of learning more about a structure of a sale. Like, that was the first time I probably actually really had sales training where, it was like, what is truly prospecting, and then how do you qualify a deal, and what is pre-call planning, right? It's like, I didn't learn that until I started in 2007 at Paychex. I was just kind of flying blind, like a lot of salespeople do early on. And then they helped me put some structure around it. So I was able to take my experiences of resiliency and courage and, being literally able to talk to almost anyone, and then add some structure to it that Paychex gave. And as I went through the corporate ladder there in multiple different roles, I was exposed to a lot of great mentors. And again, they just always had fantastic training. So as I moved into leadership, top grading or many different different techniques and everything. Yep. So a lot of that was brought to me through Paychex.
Cool. So Patti, you've got a lot of interesting experience: banking, real estate, payroll, tech. So for our audience out there, they're younger in career, they're trying to figure it out. Tech's kind of sexy right now, but everything's cyclical. So what type of advice would you give our listeners as it relates to an entry point into sales? Like, what should they be thinking about?
What should they be thinking about? I think you want to get into an organization that is early on, that is known for their training.
Yep.
I think that's huge. And especially if you're going through the interview process with that organization, make sure you're interviewing that manager as much as they're interviewing you.
Great advice.
You can have very poor experiences at a great organization because you don't align with the leader's beliefs. And so just making sure that you're checking in on that, I think, is important, especially that first sales leader, I think, is going to groom you quite a bit. And a lot of like your day-to-day is going to reflect on how did they do it. So make sure you've got the right person aligned as that first line leader.
Yeah.
I love that. I actually, going way back, I started my career doing broadcast television, which was a blast.
A bust or a blast?
It was both bust and blast. But then I got into selling advertising.
Okay.
And I'll never forget the leader that gave me that shot, that chance, and what I had to do to get the job. I put a lot of effort in, was very prepared, and that served me well because I had zero experience selling, and she gave me a shot, right? But not only that, was just an incredible coach and developer of people, and that served me very well because there wasn't great training with that job. It was you kind of had to just get out there and start doing it to figure it out. But she spent a lot of time in the field with me, gave me a lot of great feedback, and made me want to come back better, right, constantly. So now that you've transitioned into a leader, and we want to hear about that transition, how are you helping your salespeople kind of accelerate their development?
Oh, man. So I think first off, like my 8 years of sales leadership at Paychex, I was really doing a lot of grooming of just at first them having to understand what the solution is, and then why is it important to a business owner, and like how does it help from a compliance standpoint, but also efficiency, right? And so there's something when you can watch a sales rep, just all of a sudden it clicks, right, where they understand. And it's such a gratifying feeling for me, like selfishly. I love that enablement and the coaching. And so leadership to me, even in this role, is still about having someone out there who's able to motivate you, remove obstacles, have fun with, and just help them. Like I approach leadership as I'm going to go out and help people today. Sure. And whether it's sales reps that report directly to me or a sales rep that needs help, like what do we need to do to move this forward? Right. What is this next obstacle, that you need to overcome? So I feel like as long as I just focus on helping, the transition of leadership has been great.
Yeah. No, that's really good. I feel like it's interesting because you have to choose to show up every day as a leader, right? You get to, and you have to remind yourself of that because it's adventurous, right? You're going to have days with a lot of challenges, and there's days where you get to go out and be part of some big wins and all that. But you kind of have to be the steady one, right? When you've got ups and downs with the people that you lead. Do you have any specific examples of maybe whether it was a younger seller, younger in tenure, that you kind of helped get over the hump, or someone that maybe was struggling, and did you put together a plan or something to help them figure it out and move forward?
Trying to think through the years. I think one person who comes to mind, there's two people that come to mind. One is current, and another one is a while ago, where she was hired in by a peer of mine, and she ended up on my team. And, I always talk about my 3 A's are activity, accountability, and attitude. Those are the 3 things. It's like, if your numbers aren't there, but you have those 3 things, I know that you're trying, right?
Those are all controllables.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yeah. And then the numbers will come, if you focus on those things. So this person came on my team and she did all of those things, but it was like every month was just like a struggle to get it done. And it was like, then we kind of looked at what her role is, and she was such an asset to the organization, but not in the right role. Right. And we shifted her to more of a marketing role. And we had hired her, she was a guerrilla marketer at Jimmy John's, brought her into a, individual contributor. She did okay. But when we had her in the right role where it wasn't as much of a direct sale, she took off. Another sales.
So recognizing that, you have someone with the right attributes, maybe wrong seat.
Correct.
Move them into another area that can have a greater impact.
Absolutely.
And, awesome.
And it's fun watching some of these people that I've hired out of college who maybe had selling certificates and things like that. And now one was just, I think, for the 3rd time manager of the year. And so watching them have these accolades and these great things is so rewarding. So for her, it was fantastic.
That's great.
And Patti, in the intro, we talked about turnarounds. You've been part of leading some teams with, you may have been in a really good spot and you had to just hire good talent and grow it. Mm-hmm. Sounds like you've got some experience where you just really had to turn the whole thing around.
Yeah.
Talk us through that. maybe a turnaround story, and then I've got a follow-up when you're done.
Okay. My first role going into leadership at Paychex, I was taking over an office, and I wasn't really sure. I hadn't, I was a peer of theirs, now coming to take over another area. I didn't know them that well. The very first thing, it was kind of like an inside joke, and I took them being number 100 out of like 105 districts to 14 the first year. It was like, part of it was just turning the light on.
Yeah.
And I mean, literally, the manager used to sit in his office with the blinds drawn and the light off. I was like, all right, guys,
scary.
We're going to turn the light on. We're going to open up the blinds. We're going to have conversation. The door is going to be open. And so that culture and I set a very fast pace. And so it's like the culture and the people are the first things you need to look at in any turnaround situation. And that is really what I focused on in that situation. Some people ended up not staying on. There was one gentleman that told me 86% wasn't that bad.
Wow.
That hurts even hearing it.
I was like, yes, it yes, actually, it's very bad. I had another one who told me, she's like, what approach do you think I should take? Do you think I should go out and I need 3 more, we were selling payroll. So 3 more payroll to get to my number. Do I share my goal in an excited way, or she was literally going to turn around and go to CPAs and say she may be let go? Could you give me a referral? I go, why would you ever do that? Why would anyone want to refer you? And we had this conversation. I told her to ask 3 people what the correct approach is. And she called me at the end of the day and she's like, yeah, nobody said I should go and talked about how, but that was kind of the people I was taking over.
Yeah.
Right. And so it was setting expectation, raising activity levels, turning the light on, and let's go. Let's do this together, putting that vision out there of what we're going to.
Did you have someone helping you through that? Because that was your first leadership role. So how did you go into leadership? What happened that gave you that opportunity? Did you drive that? And then talk a little bit about, how you jumped in. Did you have a really good mentor, or did you just, your natural instincts take over in terms of the turnaround?
How did I get into it? I'm always raising my hand, hey, I'll help, and was part of the management candidate program, and it prepped me for it. And when the opportunity opened, I interviewed, got the role. So kind of more typical. The other part of your question was? Well,
just as you came in, your first leadership job, you had to take over a team that needed a turnaround. So did you have someone advising you or helping you, or what was your soundboard?
My sounding board was probably my old manager, because I started and my manager who had hired me was immediately let go. They brought in someone who I didn't know, who ended up being a fantastic role model for me, great mentor, but I didn't know him in the beginning.
Yeah.
But I think how we saw success was having a plan and a vision. Because I can remember I set them I was taking over a team that was struggling, and I put a 90-day plan together that I was going to hit 2 out of the 3 months. And when I missed the first month, that determination was how are we going to get this done? And so for me, I think it wasn't in that case as much about a mentor helping me. It was that I was just ready to get into the field and get dirty with them and make it happen. And it was a little dirty in the beginning. And then you fine tune it, as you obviously have to, unfortunately, work some people out of the business and such. So I think in the beginning, it was just grin and bear it and get through it.
Yeah.
And then once a gentleman walked into the role who ended up being a great mentor, and he's a great sales leader today, he helped me shape more of sales leadership as a destination and a profession that you can truly achieve. And so it kind of made me rethink of what was I actually doing, and setting the expectation of these are people's lives you have. Mm-hmm. I have a sales rep that has 6 kids. That's something that I think about every single day for his achievement, and he really helped me learn that.
That's great, because you've become a connected leader, right? When you say you win the hearts and the minds of your team, you win their minds when they know that you're trying to help them win business and be successful, and you win their hearts when they know you actually care about them. And clearly the fact that you think about that every day, you care about your team and them being successful. And I think that's authentic, transparent leadership from how you're describing it. What are some of the lessons you've learned from assuming that mentor or other leaders that you've applied into the world today?
I I think the one thing that I learned the most from him was to be a student of sales and be a student of leadership. When you get into sales, how I did, where you just kind of stumble into it. You just kind of think that...
I don't know that you really stumbled into it. You started at 16 years old.
I mean, I thought I was going to be a teller at a bank, you know? So then they're like, hey, you get $5 for every checking account. You know, I was like, okay.
Yeah.
So
it was natural.
Yeah. So I think definitely learn to be like a student of the craft is very important. I've also learned, it was interesting, I had this conversation with the head of Americas that I report a couple layers up to. And we were talking about moving into a role of a second line leader and the importance of trust. Mm-hmm. And so we were working through an activity for me to go into my next one-on-one where I'm reflecting on a leader I had that was a second line leader, that he was a great person and I'm friends with him to this day, but he was not in the right role at that point. And so I was like, you know what? I bet I can bring a lot of context to the next conversation if I just break down these two relationships. And you learn so much from people that aren't doing it the right way, in your opinion, too. So I've had experiences both way. Much more fantastic leaders than where I'm like, Yeah.
Back to the I want to double click on the.
Can you not say it? I thought you were going to say that like I did in the beginning.
Gotcha. I was at a party last night until 2. I just, when we look at resumes, and this is for some of our listeners out there, do they want to go through some tough times and be part of that turnaround, or do they want to roll out? Mm-hmm. And Billy, before we jumped on, you were saying, hey, as long as someone can explain why they moved on, maybe it does make sense. I'm of the school that I want to see people tough it out. Like, I probably stay at companies too long. Mm-hmm. If that's my issue. So I got kind of that opposite. So what do you look at when you look at resumes and you see someone rolling out 1.5 out, 2 out, 3 out? Is that someone that you immediately say no to? Or what do you think of when someone isn't being maybe that resilient and they're not sticking around?
Yeah.
What does that make you think about?
I mean, I assume immediately they're going to be at my organization for 1.5 2 years.
Yep.
And I go in, I will still have a conversation. Mm-hmm. I do a lot of interviews for people that report to you. And I'll usually call that regional sales director and be like, why are we talking to this person? You know, and I'll talk it through with them. And then I get on the phone and I don't call them out. I mean, but it's part of the conversation. Like, hey, like this does not show that you're going to be here much longer than 1.5 years. Mm-hmm. Talk to me about it. And kind of going back to what you were saying, like, is their story makes sense? So we do actually have a recent hire who has a lot of hopping around, and he's doing great on your team now. So, I mean, it can be there, but it's the why. It can't be the, hey, I've got a great network. Mm-hmm. And a friend of mine tapped me on the shoulder because there was this awesome opportunity. And then 2 years later, the same thing happened. Yeah. Right? Like, what really happened? Did it go out of his... I love, it can be lateral. I love mobility within an organization. Like, mm-hmm. I love when I see that on a resume. Mm-hmm. Like, maybe that spot's not working for you anymore. Try something different, you know? Or you've grown into a new role. So I love seeing that on...
And for our listeners out resumes. There... How many times have you hired someone and they've got those hops in the resume, right? And you ask about it. Hey, why? And Billy, you were referencing that earlier. And they give you this answer. You know, I hear a lot personally, you know what? I didn't do my homework. I got sold a bill of goods. Yep. I didn't know. So to prevent that, back to Patti, your earlier point, which is, you know, how curious are you at the beginning of your search? And what questions are you doing to corroborate maybe a story from a sales leader that may be doing the hire? Mm-hmm. Like, I'm just trying to figure out if they did a little bit more diligence on the front end, they wouldn't be in that position. So shame on them for not knowing and just believing. So how do you do that when you're younger? How do you just qualify an opportunity better when you're maybe not that old?
I think you have to me, I think it's that leader. They always say, like, people don't leave organizations, they leave leaders. Yep. I don't think enough people know that you should be interviewing that manager. And I know I mentioned this already. Yep. But it's something as an interview person, when I'm interviewing people working for you, I want to know, because each of your leaders are very different. Mm-hmm. Tell me about your best leader. And so, but I think you have to have someone that teaches you that at a young age of like, what should you be looking for in an organization? Maybe that's a parent, maybe that's an early mentor doing it, but I think it's someone teaching them that early on.
Yeah. And George Shanine, we had George on the podcast, and when his son was trying to find a job, he's out ahead now. George's son's out ahead. And I said, George, what are we going to do? Because we have a lot of contacts. We have a decent network that we could, if you wanted to go into technology. And George was adamant that his son was going to work for someone that he trusted, right? And back to your trust piece. But it's investigating the network through other people to find trust, right? Where if it's single threaded, you just don't know what you don't know. Yeah. So that's what George did.
And I thought you said it really well earlier on. You said it's important, right, that people are also equally interviewing the person they're going to go work for. Because that is your culture. You can dig into the culture and try to understand that, but kind of that micro group that you're with every single day, that becomes your compass of how you feel every day, how you're performing. Do you have the support to go and grow? And so I do think there's a piece of this where if someone's being recruited, it's one thing. If they're just out searching for a bunch of jobs, they're trying to figure it out. I think it's really important if you're in the job market to do your homework on the company, on the people that are in that company. Yep. Some of my best interviews, when I get on the phone, by the time I talk to somebody, they've talked to 20 people in the organization, and they've driven a lot of that on their own. They just randomly reach out to people on LinkedIn. I'll get notes. I'll get text messages from people out in the field saying, FYI, so-and-so reached out to me, had a great conversation. Yeah. I love that because they're doing their due diligence, right? So who's taking time to prepare and show up ready to go. But I do think it comes down to what's that criteria. And then in terms of their background, I think I've noticed a couple things. If there's some early jumps early on, I think everyone's trying to figure it out, right? They may jump in, get their first couple selling experiences, and then maybe there's an opportunity, whether it's through a connection or whatever that is, they move on. But I've also seen it later in someone's career where maybe they were with a company for a really long time, and then they go take a risk. Maybe they'll go to a startup and it doesn't work out. Maybe they hit 2 or 3 of those. So that's why for me, I like to look at their journey on paper, but I don't automatically write them off. If they come to me and they've been vetted and people like them, I like just to hear their story and how well they can articulate kind of their experiences, and then are they being transparent about what happened? Hey, I was let go. We went through a restructure or whatever the situation is, and then I tend to look for attributes. Experiences are transferable. Skills you can teach. You want both, but I really like the attributes, and if you feel like they have really strong character, they're telling a really solid story, and it's explainable, and we think they can come here and be successful, then I'm willing to take a risk.
Yep. So, Patti, your team today, I just wanted to dig into, our listeners that are considering going into sales. They might be in their first handful of years. What are the things that, if you look at your team today and you say, man, these are the attributes that I love that my best of the best are consistent with?
Yeah.
What are they? And can you share that with us?
Great personalities, good people. I have a team of really good people. Like, they're genuinely I like spending time with them. The account executives like spending time with them. It's like we do spend a lot of time together. Yeah. High activity.
Right.
And then that achievement mindset. I mean, it's very easy to, and I say this, knock on wood, to try to raise the bar for them because they're already, pushing it up for me, like, hey, what else can we do here? So, I mean, just the go-get-itness of everyone on the team, I'm very fortunate and very lucky to have the team that I do today.
I think you and Billy, in particular, Billy and I were chatting a little bit earlier about you and, hey, what's Patti all about and what makes her so good? And I think you share a common quality. And it's being a field general. You are in the field all the time, and your activity rate is just next level. I'm
top 4 in the globe for expenses.
I believe it.
And they started sending us a dashboard every Friday, and I told my leaders, I'm like, is this on purpose? Because you want me to see my numbers?
Yeah.
So yeah.
So that, is that a learned trait? You're not going to hire everyone that's you. That has that motor, but they could be really good salespeople. How do you coach activity?
I think first you set the pace. I I think first and foremost, it's always going to start with the leader. And
Sure.
I need to be running fast, because if I'm not out in the field, how can I ask them to be out in the field? So first and foremost, it's that. And then I think it's just showing them like how the activity equates to sales.
Mm-hmm.
So like I always say, it's always a pipeline problem.
Yeah.
It's pipeline starts with activity. So when they can see that correlation and the success that comes from an event or a webinar or a great conversation or a strategic conversation, and they can start getting excited about that and get some early wins, I mean, that's the change that you want to see.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll just add to that I think for me, I was fortunate early on just to have it modeled for me. Like I had, different leaders that I really knew and respected, like that first one I talked about, selling advertising, but even getting in a medical device. I had some leaders that would come out in the field and they'd show me what great looks like, or they'd challenge me or give me that corrective feedback, which I really, really loved. I also was, I was really motivated and ambitious. I want to be successful. So I was always reaching out to the people that were in the top rankings across the country. And I just ask a bunch of questions. What do you do different? How do you stand out? I'd talk to their bosses and ask their leaders, how do they manage those people? So I think it's back to being curious. But I do, there's part of me and it's, I have a goal, next year to try to wind down some of the travel, because I'm out pretty much every week. Mm-hmm. At some point it's hard to be productive, in your role, when you're always out in the field. But I'm just a big believer that when you're out in the field and you're spending time with the people representing your brand and with those customers, that's where you learn the most.
Oh yeah.
And you see how people are representing you. And to me, it gives you either a strong indicator that you've got the right team across the board. And there's always going to be pockets where you have to consider tweaks or changes. But in general, it just gives you a good pulse of the business. Yeah. And so I think that's just important. I think for anyone going into leadership, I think taking the time, it's not an office job. Like you got to be out there and you got to always be working on your craft. I don't disagree that leadership isn't, I guess I'd rephrase leadership being a destination. I think it's more of a journey than a destination. You get to leadership, but it's ongoing. You're always learning, right? And there's a lot you can do to raise the bar. But I just think it's so important to be out in front of the business with the team.
There was a situation a couple weeks ago. We had a meeting up in Wisconsin, and I drove out, and this AE was doing a fantastic job in this presentation. I mean, he was like crushing it. And I see him about to move past the slide. Well, at the slide at the bottom is the chevrons. That's the mutual plan that's asking for the business. And I kind of tap him. Mm-hmm. Are you going to go over that? Because I felt he was about to go right past, like, hey, I put it up on the screen. Is that good enough? I was like, no. And it was like, and he's like, do you think he goes, I wasn't going to. And he goes, do you think I should? And he kind of looks, and I was sitting down, and I go, well, yeah. And then we got in the car, and I go, you going over that was asking for the business. And fantastic sales rep. He crushed the presentation. It was also kind of funny part of it. But it's like, it didn't matter that I was a leader. It was just someone out in the field with him that saw something and pointed it out. But it's like, if you're not out there doing those things, and in this situation, he kind of told, he's like, I haven't really had anyone come out in the field with me. Yeah. And it's like, it's so important. It doesn't matter that I'm a leader or not. It's just someone out there, that was willing to do it.
But that one tweak could have a profound impact on his business because it's set up close, right?
Yeah. So we're going to get it.
Yeah. And that's, I think for our listeners out there that are younger in career, don't go it alone. It's
so much more fun.
It's so much more fun, and just be selective about who you're going to pick to be your coach.
Yeah.
But I was in Wisconsin last week as well, and we were with a customer, and we do a little debrief after it. And I said, well, how do you think it went? And you got to be careful of that question too. I don't know if she thought she was being set up, which I wasn't trying to do. But I said, hey, here's a simple piece of advice. When you have a leader like myself in the field, first of all, I want to be there. I want to help. You may want to get the leaders to talk to one another to kind of set the tone for the call. Instead it was quick intros, and I didn't really get a chance to the reason I'm there is to establish rapport with another leader.
Sure.
And maybe ask a simple back to the questioning and back to being inquisitive. Tell me about ServiceNow, and like, what do you think about, what's the boardroom think about ServiceNow? Yeah. Like complete softballs that she may not have asked in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a little thing like if I wasn't in the field, I wouldn't have that ability to coach like
Right.
you're saying. And people are dying to be coached. Like the best sales reps out there, the best sales leaders are dying for a coach to help make them get better.
Agreed.
You know?
Yeah.
Well, hey, so before we get to the quick hits, which we won't have Demetri delivering those today, some mic issues, so we'll take you through those.
Okay.
Part of this is the Goat's Gravy is we want to have the greatest of all time sellers through our network that come on and talk about their experiences, their story, and then the gravy is what's their secret sauce. So I think if there's anything that you think you want to leave with the audience that maybe is that best advice or that secret sauce that's allowed you to be successful in your career and pass that forward, what is that advice?
I mean, to me, it always comes back to, from an individual contributor standpoint, the resiliency and overcoming any obstacle because you get so many no's. So to me, it's how can you strengthen that part of you? That a lot equates to emotional intelligence, which I'm very passionate about as well. And so I think it's just understanding when to say what, when not to say it. Mm-hmm. Those things all work together to help you move that sale a little bit further down the line, get the right job, whatever that looks like.
Yeah. I'm a big Joe Rogan freak. Like he walks on water to me.
Okay.
It's a little weird. But one thing he talks about quite a bit is, how do you do the tougher things and pick them and select them? I was talking to my daughter today and she didn't make the volleyball team she wanted to. And it's like the sky is falling. And I was talking to my wife about it. And I said, when are we going to give these kids a chance to be resilient, to practice on that? Mm-hmm. And as a leader to ask those questions on, tell me through the tough times. It's like, talk me through it. Like, how did you get around it? So for our listeners out there, just don't pick the easy way out.
Right.
Because you're going to need the at-bats, through whatever career, especially in sales, you're going to need those at-bats. So pick something tough.
Yeah.
Like, don't take the easy way out. And that's hard, I think, to translate, because it's not intuitive to pick the hard thing.
Yeah. I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's also what you said earlier. I love it's a team sport, right? And so part of going through those challenges is having people you can go to. Right. And it's to your point, Scotty, I think it's taking on those challenges, but it's also doing the work. It's being prepared, taking time, call someone, do a pre-call plan, do a role play. Right. And even if you lose a deal or something happens, go do the postmortem and talk to other people, get advice, and then pick yourself up and go do it again. Right. And at some point, it's a game of persistence. It'll pay off. Right. So I agree with you. I mean, that is selling. And, we talked about this the other day with Tony Blood, but that's why it's important. When you hire people we're saying, how do you hire for grit? It's hard to tell. But if you talk to people about adverse situations they've been to, whether personal or professional, how they manage through that, right? Those are the type of people are going to be able to come in and withstand some challenging situations and environments. I think it's great advice. All right, well, we'll jump to our quick hits.
Hey, Billy, before we have quick hits.
Yes.
Could I ask one more question?
Yeah, please.
Cool. So the enablement piece.
Yes.
I just want to talk through that for 2 seconds because, Billy, I think you do a wonderful job of this. And I think the best sales individual contributors, leaders have unique ways to enable themselves, but it's got to be a fit for them. So we can't tell anyone this is how you need to be enabled. Mm-hmm. How do you view that for yourself? And what are some of the things that you do to enable yourself?
I think I have to do it at times when I can. Mm-hmm. So podcasts are amazing because you have so much access to amazing sales leaders now, right? And so sometimes it can be driving in the car, right? Other times it's like maybe because I didn't go to college, I've got this like passion of getting a bunch of certificates and like women in leadership. So I know how I like to learn. I like to be collaborative. I like to be in like group environments and such. So the podcasts are great because it's a very easy way to do it, but I absolutely love putting myself in situations with peers and learning from them. So I'm more of that classroom style. And I always try to put myself. So I was out in Santa Clara over the summer doing a leadership course, awesome. Always signing up, Oracle had some fantastic different enablements as well, where it was like putting together a mutual plan or putting together an influence map, like all those things. And so I think putting myself in situations where I can learn those things and being proactive about it is how I've seen success.
Yeah. And for our audience out there, I work with Patti every day, right? And you're the first person to say when, big topic right now is Gen AI.
Yeah.
Right. And you're the first person to say, why don't we do this? And let's do this. And let's collaborate around this. And how are we going to jumpstart this? And, just for those that are trying to get ahead, be on that cutting edge of start doing jobs before you get them.
Yep.
And that's something that rings through me. And as I watch people like you do it on a daily basis, that's why you're getting ahead. That's building the culture, right? And that's why people are staying with you. And that's why your teams are so successful. So
thank you.
Well done.
That's awesome. Well, speaking of the quick hits, and we'll run through this. It's really just kind of your gut, your opinion on a couple of these topics. But we talked a little bit about this, but prospecting, building pipeline, obviously important task for sales.
The most important.
Yeah. So just give us your thoughts on prospecting. You have a brand new rep starting today. What do you tell them?
Prospecting should be 60% of your job right now. Like a majority of what you're doing is building pipeline.
Build the funnel.
It is always, I say it all the time, it's a pipeline issue. It's always a pipeline issue. People are like, if I had just gotten this one deal, I would have hit my number. I'm like, that's absolutely not true. Mm-hmm. I was like, it's the other phone calls you didn't make and the pipeline that you don't have, because at the end of the day, you wouldn't have needed that deal so bad had you had the pipeline.
Yeah.
And it makes it easier, right? Where, my sales rep in Illinois is going to crush the year, and he calls and tells me that a deal is coming in probably at like half of it size. And I was like, okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's like, as a leader, I'm not as wound tight up that we just lost $100,000,
right?
Because I know he's way over his number. We have more pipeline, and it's like, it affords you so much ability to breathe and to make better decisions, like when you're not in that. So I'm like, it's always a pipeline issue in my opinion.
Yeah.
What's your expectation? Is it 3x?
3.5x.
3.5x. All right, look at that.
Patti added a 0.5.
Yes.
Everyone, but so depending on the business unit, so I would bet like in the HR business unit, it's probably closer to, I would think, 5 to 6x potentially. So it just kind of depends.
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate to have the role that I do and the team that I do and lead the BU that I do. But, we can crush it, honestly. I would say 2.7x plus. Mm-hmm. But that's because I have great partners.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And I think the mistake, Patti, that I've seen, probably the biggest mistake, and I've made it myself when I was with VMware, I'll never forget it. You're doing these big deals and these ELAs and high fives, and I didn't take the time to consistently build the pipe.
Yeah.
Because I got caught up in closing.
Yeah.
And I, had a nice year, but I woke up like Q1 the following year with nothing.
Yeah.
My boss was like, dude, what is going on? And shame on all of us. We just didn't even see it. So creating that time, during the week to hold yourself accountable, or picking a buddy and saying, let's hold each other accountable. Moving on, networking, like big topic, and you weaved in some networking stories here today.
Yeah.
Well, what are your thoughts and advice for our younger and career folks around networking?
Yeah. Get out there, talk to people. I mean, there's so many areas that you can network now. Through social media, you can join different clubs, and now we're back in person, and so you can get to these events. And it's like you never burn a bridge in technology, and so the relationships that you build now in networking, foster them, because you never know when they're going to come later in life and really help you. Mm-hmm. You run into a lot of the same people, so I mean, do it early and often, I guess would be my opinion, because that's probably going to build some pipeline too.
Right,
no doubt.
Yeah,
pipeline or your next job. You never know too, right? So moving to interviewing. How about interviewing? Do you have kind of your go-to questions you like to ask, or just any advice to the audience around interviewing, preparation for interviewing? Yeah.
I always think about the role that person is going to play with me or my team. And so I try to structure some of the questions there. First, obviously, I want to get to know them. I want to see if they can carry a good story. I know you talked about it, so just tell me about yourself, like highs, lows, where did you learn the most along the way? But I always want to understand, especially if I'm hiring for another team. I already mentioned, tell me about the best leader you've ever worked for. Tell me about a leader that, you don't. So I think it's all about making sure that they're going to align with what the team is trying to get done, what that leader's trying to get done, whether that's me, and then maybe what's missing on the team. I think also trying to find individuals for your team that maybe has a strength that's missing from your current team. Yeah. So like gentleman I just hired in Colorado, great manufacturing background, can have those conversations with C-levels. It's like, that was a trait that I was like, I like all these things. Plus I think he can bring that to the team.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's great.
Prep. So Bill McDermott, who runs ServiceNow, may have heard of Bill. When we've had him engaged in sales calls, his prep is something like I've never seen.
Okay.
Right. So as you look at preparing for sales calls, what are some of the best practices that pop into your mind?
I think you want to understand who you're talking to, what's important to them. This sounds crazy, but especially if we're talking early, find out what the company does. I've been on sales calls.
Crazy. Too, yeah.
And you're just like, you don't even know how they make, and sometimes if we are in a high transaction business. I think I have 48 deals still that have to close over the next 9 days, so very high transaction.
I was in a good mood, Patti. Thanks.
Thanks for the reminder.
I'm on them. But it's like, now you distracted me a little bit. Sorry. No, that's okay. But it's like, it's a high transactional business. And so sometimes they're moving so fast that it's like they forget to do the basics. But it's like, what do they do for a business? How do they make money? Who are we talking to? What's important to them? Just like, how much can you find out to be prepared? That part of it is showing that person you're talking to that you did your due diligence, and then arrive with a curious mind, right? Mm-hmm. Tell me what your executives think about.
I love that. Arrive with a curious mind. That's really good.
Yeah.
And the preparation piece, I do think there's the busyness of the world now makes that a little bit challenging, but man, just slow down to go fast. It makes all the difference in the world to do a pre-call plan and show up. You're in credibility right away with the customers, right? So I think that's really important.
Yeah,
absolutely.
All right, so let's talk about follow-up, because this is another one, and maybe back to the interview. Would you hire someone if they were excellent interviewing, but you never got a follow-up?
Would I? Probably at some point in life, what is the reason they didn't follow up? It's not a great move, but it's following up after an interview. It's following up. I think what's important to understand, no howdy doody calls. Like, how you doing? Mm-hmm. Just checking in. Those never go over well. We're selling to executives that make a fair amount of money. And so what type of follow-up are you going to show that's going to be valuable for them, that they're going to want to continue that conversation is important, interview or in a sales process. Yeah.
That's really good. Early on in my career, I was taught, we called it making deposits, but just find something industry related or something that you learn from that first discovery meeting about them that they're interested in. And then every now and then just send them a little note, hey, thought you'd appreciate seeing this, versus just checking in, right? Just send them a little tidbit, keep the conversation going.
Yeah, and if you're working like we work, Patti, where we've got, big emphasis on net new, but man, our current customers are gold to us.
Yeah.
And one thing that I miss oftentimes is just going back to them and just our customers that we just did that deal with 6 months ago, a year ago, how things going.
Yeah.
This is what my team's saying. You check in with the partner to have, to Billy's point, a deposit. And I think oftentimes we miss that.
Yeah, we do for sure.
We talked about self-development, anything negotiating. You and I do a fair amount of negotiating on a daily basis, internal and external.
Yeah.
What comes to mind on some best practices, just negotiating in general with 9 days left?
Stop talking. Like I literally say, after we put a price out there, I will say in my head, first 2 talks loses. Mm-hmm. And then I will stare at the sales reps like, shut up.
Yeah.
Just like, let's get a response. So I feel like in negotiations, we too often start responding before we understand what the actual objection is. And so sales manager early on said, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Remember, just sometimes just be quiet, let them respond, understand, what the actual objection is before we just start throwing things at them.
For sure.
Yeah.
Just be patient. We had Bobby Herzberger on the podcast in the past, and I gave him some feedback one day. It was, in fairness to Bobby, it was after Vegas.
Okay.
We're walking off the plane, and I give Billy a hard time about this sometimes too. I ask him a question, and before I'm done asking my question, he's not only asking another question, but answering another question. I said, did you listen to a word I just said? So I got to give Bobby credit. Like right after that, the next day, whenever I ask him a question, he pauses for like 10 seconds, but he over-rotated so bad, like, Bobby, you there? Bobby, that doesn't mean you ignore me when you got to find a happy medium. But I like your idea.
I had a leader that used to hang up on me if I was getting too wordy, and I'd be talking. He'd just hang up. I also am talking to myself.
Yeah.
And I'd call him back. He's like, too long-winded, man. Just give me the tea leaves. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So I learned for sure. All right. Social selling. So leveraging. Obviously, there's a lot of ways to social sell, but just your experience of social selling on LinkedIn, Twitter. How do you utilize that?
Well, I normally utilize it, obviously, selling to candidates, and my pipeline looks different, right? Because I'm trying to build a bench. But I think they're like right now. I think that it goes back to how activity, realistically. I think that's where we see a lot of selling, right? Or through social is like how are we able to use it as a one-to-many to be able to get as much information out there that we can really have that follow-up. I think if social selling, you're probably not doing it directly to one person. You're really trying to spread the message. Is how I've used that.
And lastly, we talk a lot about power to power. It's power people want to hang with power people. They want to buy from another person with power. What are your thoughts when you think of executive to executive selling? Because some people think it's not needed to get deals done.
Yeah, they're crazy.
They are crazy.
They have some no sales in there too. Who's the person that's making the decision at the end of the day? If we're not talking to that person, that's a problem. Mm-hmm. If it's going to be a CFO, you and I had this conversation on Friday, who's negotiating the deal at the end of the day? Right. If you've got a $3 million contract, it's probably not the account executive or like my rep in that case. But if we haven't inserted that power to power early on in the sales process, like you can't do it at the negotiation table, right? So you have to do it very early on, early and often with power to power. But I think you think of it as who's signing it and who is the right person to be on the phone with the CFO.
Sure.
And so that's where the other power, what makes the most sense. And so that's where it comes in. But we've had great success where deals, we've had quite a few deals this year where we've been told no, and somehow we get them back to the table. We've closed some good sized deals. So if we haven't had that alignment with power to power early on, some of those probably wouldn't have happened in the timing they did.
Because often, in the tech space, we talk about power to power all the time. And the best way to get to power, in my opinion, is the sales team. We could be parts of those teams, builds a champion. That'll eventually lead us to power. And
it's
too
not
often,
a ghost note.
It's not a ghost note.
Could you ghost write me?
The ghost written note out of left field to an executive typically isn't met with a lot of love.
No, sorry.
Although we all think it's a great idea. That's great. Billy, you want to...
I just, listen, to close out, I want to thank you for coming on, sharing your story, your experience. And it's really impressive to see the journey that you've been on throughout your career. Obviously been successful with everything you've done, everything you've touched. For me personally, I love how intentional you are about leading and having a positive impact on people.
Oh yeah.
Right. And that's something that it's just so great to always be able, that's what I love about leadership, to see people go and thrive. And like you're saying, see those leaders grow, either salespeople grow, whether it's successful selling, jumping into leadership, whatever it is, but you have an impact. And clearly you're doing that every day. So thank you for sharing that knowledge with our audience. And hopefully we'll have you back and do another episode with you sometime in the future. So
Patti,
thanks for your time.
Attitude and activity are my two. That's kind of my goat's gravy. And when I think of you, I think of your attitude spot on, and you are leading from the front from an activity standpoint. Like 2 for 2. Put yourself in a great position to coach. So thanks for coming on and being in studio. Very much appreciated.
It was very fun. Thank you.
Good luck with the close.
9
days, baby.
9 days.
All right. Thank you. See you soon.
And that brings us to the end of another episode of the Goat's Gravy. We've shared some awesome insights and strategies aimed at enhancing your journey in sales. And the conversation does not have to stop here. So be sure to follow us on social media at The Goat's Gravy and explore more at thegoatsgravy.com. Your journey towards sales mastery is ongoing, and we're here to support you at every step. So thank you for tuning in today. Stay curious, stay driven, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care.